Hi, everyone. My name is Carla Mincello, and I'm the Director of Financial Aid at Birmingham State University. And today I'm here to talk to you about completing the 2022-2023 FAFSA form. So let's get started. So first of all, the free application for federal student aid is the official name of the FAFSA form, and it's the form you need to complete each year to apply for financial aid at Birmingham State or other colleges and universities. It becomes available each year on October 1st, and it should always be free. So if you go to a website that's asking you to pay, you're probably in the wrong place. Here at FSU, we ask you to complete the form by March 1st each year. So the priority deadline for 2022-2023 is coming up on March 1st, 2022. To complete the form, you will go online to the studentaid.gov website, which we will show you in a moment. Here's some examples of the information you'll need to complete your FAFSA. You'll need an FSA ID for the student and the student's parent if the student is a dependent student, and we'll talk more about that later. You'll need the student's social security number and date of birth, and you may need 2020 income tax and income and asset information. Some of this information you may be able to transfer directly into the FAFSA using the IRS's data retrieval tool for the 2020 tax year. But you may want to have your tax returns handy in case the data retrieval tool doesn't work for you, in which case you can enter the figures directly from your tax returns into the FAFSA. Here is a screenshot of the studentaid.gov website. And to get to the FAFSA, you will go under the Apply for Aid link at the top of the page. You will fill in whether you're a student completing the form or whether you're a parent beginning the form for a student. And then you will be asked to log in with your FSA user ID and password. If you've done the FAFSA in the past, it's your username and password from last year. But if you can't remember those, you can use the Forgot My Username and Forgot My Password links to retrieve them. If you're doing the form for the first time and you don't have an FSA user ID, you can create an account at this screen. And here's an example of a parent completing the form for a student. You should read the information in this disclaimer, which reminds you that the FAFSA form is a US government form, and that when completing information on it, you should be using accurate information to the best of your knowledge, and you should not be sharing your password and FSA user ID and other information with other people. So read the statements here and accept them to move on in the form. You will want to check off which year's FAFSA you're doing. And if you completed a FAFSA last year and are now applying for 2022 to 2023, you should see a button here that allows you to do a renewal FAFSA. We recommend you do the renewal FAFSA if you're not a new student doing the form, because it will pre-populate some of the questions on the form with information from your FAFSA from last year. That makes it easier for you to do. You will need to put in a 4-digit SAVE key to allow yourself to re-access the form later on. So you can pick any 4 digits that you like, just write it down somewhere so that you remember it. And then you will have to enter it twice on this screen and click continue. If you're doing the renewal FAFSA, you will see your personal identifiers such as first name, last name, date of birth, and social security number listed from last year's FAFSA. Just make sure that everything is correct and nothing has changed. You can update anything that has changed. If you're doing the FAFSA for the first time, it's very important that you report your social security number, date of birth, and name correctly. And the name you report here should match, ideally, what is listed on your social security card. You will also be asked questions about the state of residency that you live in and how long you've lived there, and also whether you are a US citizen or have some other immigration status. As a reminder, not all students qualify for federal financial aid. US citizens typically do, and then some groups of eligible non-citizens, such as those who are permanent residents or certain statuses of immigrants, qualify for financial aid. Usually DACA students, temporary protected status students, and undocumented students do not qualify for federal and state financial aid at this time. That could always change, but as of now, while you can complete the FAFSA if you have a social security number, you may receive a message telling you that your immigration status has not been confirmed as being eligible for financial aid. And if you are a permanent resident or some other class of eligible non-citizen, it's possible we may need to see a copy of your immigration documents or your green card, so keep those handy in case we ask for them later. Some US citizens are also required to verify their status with us as well, which can include using something like a US passport to show citizenship. So just be aware that if you need to show some proof of citizenship, we'll contact you about that later on. You'll be asked some questions about whether you have completed high school or not, and what degree or certificate you'll be working on when you start college for the 2022-2023 school year. If you are starting a bachelor's degree program or completing one, you want to put that in here. Even if you intend to do a master's degree later on, you should be reporting this for the degree program that you're currently going into in the start of the 22-23 school year. And if you have not yet received your bachelor's degree and don't expect to receive it this summer, then you should answer no to that question. And then finally, what will your college grade level be when you begin the 2022-2023 school year? That has to do with what year in school you're going into. So if you are currently a senior in high school, you would put first year for your college grade level. If you are currently a sophomore in college going into your junior year, that's what you would put down here. And then the form will ask you if you're interested in being considered for work study. If so, you can put down yes. If not, you can put no or don't know. But if you answer no to this question, you can still be considered for work study if you show financial need. You would just need to let our office know that you're interested in it if it hasn't been awarded to you. And then we can see if you qualify for it. You will get a question on the form about whether you are male or female. If you are male, then it will prompt you to register with Selective Service using the FAFSA form if you haven't done so already. This is no longer a requirement to qualify for financial aid, but you still can use the FAFSA form to register with Selective Service if you haven't done that yet. There will be questions about your driver's license number. If you don't have one, you can leave it blank. There's questions about if you have ever been in foster youth or in the foster care system, and then the highest level of school completion for each of your parents. So you can just answer these questions to the best of your ability. Here you'll get some questions about if you've ever received federal aid before, and then a question about if you've ever been convicted of possession or sale of illegal drugs. You can just answer those questions honestly. They will not affect your eligibility for financial aid, but just answer those to the best of your knowledge and ability. Here you'll be asked to put some information in about your high school, and this is for the student. So there's a search here where you can search for your high school. So just fill that in, and then you can fill in the name of your state and the name of the high school and do a search, and then it should come up with your high school. Then you'll receive the section where you want to put down what colleges you want your FAFSA sent to. If this is a renewal FAFSA and you're a Framingham State student, then you will probably, you will want to go in and put down our name, and you should see us pop up there. If you want to add additional colleges, then you can put those in as well. And here you can see an example on the side after you click the search button of what the results look like, depending on what you've put in for a state and name of the colleges. You can report up to 10 colleges in this section. And our school code, in case you want to make it quicker and easier, is listed here, and that's 002185. You can search by name of school, or you can search by school code. And here you can see an example of what happens when you plug in a school, and then you will be asked whether you plan to live on campus, off campus, or with a parent or relative. So just fill that in. You may not know right now whether you're going to live on campus or not for next year. If you're thinking about living on campus, you can fill that in here. And then if you change your mind on that, you just want to let us know in the financial aid office, because we will use the answer to this question to do your financial aid for next year as either an on-campus resident student or a commuter student. So if you answer this and then change your mind later on, just let us know that. And you can do that just by emailing the financial aid office at financialaid@framingham.edu. So here you're going to receive a number of questions, which will determine whether you are considered a dependent student or not. And most of our students are dependent students. Most students under the age of 24 would be considered dependent. And usually in that case, you need to report information from one of your parents. And we'll talk more about which parent you should report in a moment. So these are what the questions are about. They'll ask if you're married, if you're currently in a graduate degree program. So not if you plan eventually to get a graduate degree, but right now, if you're in a bachelor's degree or a graduate degree program. Your birth date to determine if you've reached the age of 24 yet, which is usually when students become independent. If you have dependents of your own, so if you have your own child that you support, you would answer that here. If you're in active duty in the military or you're a veteran, or if since you're at the age of 13, you were either an orphan in foster care or a ward of the court. If you are an emancipated minor, and if you are an emancipated minor, you should be prepared to show court documentation of that. In legal guardianship or homeless. And just so you know, homeless doesn't mean, sometimes we have families that are homeless, but in this case, homeless means an unaccompanied homeless youth. So that would be if you are homeless and you don't have contact with your parents, you don't know where your parents are, you can't live with them for some reason. So if you and your parents live together in a shelter, that wouldn't necessarily be the answer to this question. So if you believe that you are a homeless unaccompanied youth, and you need some help completing the FAFSA, you can feel free to contact our office and one of our financial aid counselors can talk to you about that. We do require documentation of homelessness. So if you want to know what you would need to send us to show that, I would encourage you to come to our office and make an appointment to talk to one of us about it. So if you are able to answer yes to any of these things, then you would be considered an independent student and you don't have to put parental information on the FAFSA form. So if you are an independent student, we're going to talk a lot about the parent information that goes on the form, and you can kind of skip ahead or you can kind of ignore those sections. But most students who don't meet any of these definitions would have to report their parents' information. And we sometimes get students that have a problem because their parent doesn't want to provide the information. Normally it is required, unfortunately. So if you're in a situation where your parent is unable to provide the information or doesn't want to provide the information, you can come talk to us in the office and we can give you advice on, maybe we can talk to your parents for you, or maybe we can find out what's going on and why that information isn't available. But for most students, the parental date is going to be required. Students, unfortunately, can't usually get financial aid on their own if they're under the age of 24. So if you are a dependent student, after you answer those dependency questions, it will tell you, the FAFSA will tell you that you're likely a dependent student, and then they will ask if you will provide information about my parents. If you're unable to provide information about your parents, you can click the second box and you will be able to still complete the FAFSA, but it will be an incomplete version of the form. And what that means is that when you submit it, if there's no parental data, it will come to our office as an incomplete FAFSA, and then we will probably follow up with you by email to let you know that your FAFSA is incomplete. And you either need to provide your parents' information or you need to come see us and tell us about the situation so we can advise you about what to do. So one of the first questions that we'll ask about your parents is their marital status. So if they're married or remarried, you're going to fill that in. You will also have the option to put in that they are single or never married or divorced or separated. Sometimes people's parents are unmarried but live together, so there's an option for that. If your parents are divorced and they no longer live together, then for purposes of reporting information on the FAFSA, you would typically report the parent that you've lived with for the last 12 months leading up to the filing of the form more of the time. And if that parent is remarried, you would also report information about the step parent, and the marital status here should be remarried. So it's really the marital status of the parent that you're living with now when you're not in school, or that you lived with most recently. It's not really, if your biological parents are divorced and then remarried to other people, you don't report divorced here. You report remarried or single, whatever the status is of the parent that you live with most of the time. And this can be a little bit tricky, and a lot of students make mistakes on it. So if you're not sure what you should report because your parents have maybe it's a recent marital status change, or you're just not sure what to put here, feel free to contact us. We'd be happy to go over your situation and help you with this. So who is considered a parent? Your biological or adoptive parents and step parents. And again, if the parent is separated but living together, select married. If they're not legally divorced, but your parents are separated and no longer live together, then you can report divorced or separated on the form. And here you can see in the case of divorced or separation, provide information only about the parent the student lived with more in the last 12 months, and the step parent if that parent is remarried. I know that in rare cases, there are sometimes students that bounce back and forth between their parents' families and live in the households an almost equal amount of time. So if you're not sure which of your parents you should report as the custodial parent, you can contact our office and we'll be happy to ask you a few questions about it and let you know which parent we think should be reported on the form. When reporting information about your parent on the FAFSA, if you will want to report their social security number, and if they don't have one, you just report all zeros for that. Their parent's last name, first initial, and their date of birth. And your parent's email address can be reported if your parents would like to receive communication from FAFSA. If they don't want to receive it, then you don't have to provide the parent's email address. Just as you did with yourself, you'll be asked to provide information about the parent's state of legal residency. And just so you know why they asked for this question, the Commonwealth of Massachusetts considers your parent's state of legal residency as well as your own in determining whether you qualify for state-based aid or not. So that's the reason for these questions. Then there's questions about your parents' household and specifically how large your parents' household is. So they will ask you to provide information on your parents' other dependents. So if you have siblings basically or other family members that live with your parents, you want to follow the instructions on these forms to determine whether they should be reported there or not. And then based on your information to the first set of questions, the next screen will tell you the size of your parents' household. And then there'll be a question about how many members of that household are in college at the same time. So if you have siblings that are also going to college next year, then you want to report that there. You don't report your parents if they are in college because the FAFSA does not take that into consideration for determining financial aid eligibility. So again, who is included in the household size? The student's parents, the parents' other children, even if they don't live with their parents, if the parents are still providing more than half of their financial support for the next year, and the children are federally dependent. So that would normally mean if your siblings are under 24, again, not married, don't have children of their own, not in graduate school, et cetera. And then other people who live with the parents and the parents provide more than half of their financial support may also be included in the household size. And that would typically be like if your grandparents live with your parents and they support them or provide more than half of their support, or other family members sometimes like nieces, nephews, grandchildren. Usually sometimes there are non-related people in the household, but usually this refers to other family members that are living with you and your parents. And then again, who is included in the number in college? It's always going to include you. And then if you have siblings or other household members aside from your parents who will be attending at least half-time in 2022, 2023 in a program that leads to a college degree or certificate. So this doesn't include, siblings that are in high school, only if they're going to be going to college next year. So here we're entering the screens that are going to ask you to provide parental financial information. And then again, this is from the 2020 tax year. So first of all, if you are lucky enough to be able to transfer your parents' tax information using the IRS data retrieval tool, we recommend you do that because it's the easiest thing to do. So there will be a question that asks if your parents have completed their IRS income tax return for the year 2020. So you want to answer that. If they've already completed it, put that in. If they haven't yet, you would put in will file. If they don't file, and they're not required to file taxes, then you would put will not file. If they have filed, you put in what type of income tax return they do. And for most people now, this is an IRS Form 1040. And then for 2020, you're going to put in their tax filing status, which could be, some examples are married filing joint, head of household, single. So ask your parents what the answer to this is, and you'll plug that in. Then you'll be given information about the IRS data retrieval tool and be given the option to see if you can use that. So there'll be a button here that says proceed to the IRS. So again, if your parents have already filed their 1040 forms for 2020, then you should try to use the IRS data retrieval tool and get the information directly from them. If they haven't filed yet, then this will not be an option for you. If you fill out that proceed to the IRS button, then it will take you to the IRS data retrieval tool. So there are some people that will not be able to use the IRS data retrieval tool, and they are listed here. So married individuals who filed married filing separately or head of household, you probably won't be able to use the DRT. It will probably not give you the option, or it will reject it when you try. If your parents were married in 2020, but since then have gotten divorced, then you may not be able to do this. Same thing goes if you file a foreign tax return, you can't use the IRS data retrieval tool. If your parents have tax ID numbers rather than SSNs, they may not be able to. And then finally, one of the things that the IRS data retrieval tool does is that it will match up your address with the address on your tax return. So if your address has changed or your parents' address has changed since you filed your 2020 taxes, you might get a message when you try to use the data retrieval tool that it's unavailable to you. If you get that message, it just means that you're going to have to do a little more work on your FAFSA. It doesn't mean that you're in trouble with the IRS or anything like that. So it's nothing to worry about. But if you're not able to use the IRS data retrieval tool, you'll have to actually go through each of the tax and income questions and enter the data manually. So again, if you can't use the IRS data retrieval tool, then you'll need to have your tax forms handy so that you can report the adjusted gross income for 2020, some salary and self-employment income information for each parent, and then the income tax from the tax return. So when you go to complete the income questions, and the FAFSA will walk you through those, some things to be aware of is that it will tell you what line item to get the major questions from. For example, the adjusted gross income for both parents and students can be found on the 2020 tax return on line 11 for the Form 1040. Income tax paid, which is another question you'll be asked, can be found, it's on IRS Form 1040 line 22. And then if you file a Schedule 2, it's minus line 2 of the Schedule 2. If you don't file a Schedule 2, then it's you just find it on line 22 of the IRS Form 1040. You'll also be asked to report income earned from work. So you can get that from your W-2s or your parents' W-2s, and usually that's in box 1 of the W-2 forms for 2020. So if you can't use the IRS data retrieval tool, or even if you do, you still need the W-2s to fill in the income from work questions. So you want to have some of those documents handy when you do this form. But you'll be given some additional income questions after you fill in the major ones about AGI and taxes paid, et cetera. And most of these are unusual things that most students and parents don't have, but you want to read through them, and if any of them apply to you, you'll fill them in here. For example, if you or your parents received combat pay in 2020, fill in the instructions and enter that here. If you received taxable grants and scholarships, so when you file your tax return, sometimes you have to report taxable grants and scholarships. So if you have that on your tax return, and usually it would show up in line 1 as part of the, as part of the wages on your tax return. And then there would be like an SCH notated next to it. Usually when tax preparers do it, that's how they do this. And you can always ask your tax preparer if you're not sure whether you have this or not. But if you do have taxable grant or scholarship, you would report that here. Education credits, which many people actually have. So you should check your tax return to see if you have one of these. Those would be found on your IRS Schedule 3, line 3 of the Form 1040 for 2020. If you had untaxed portions of IRA distributions or pensions from your IRS 1040, you would find this usually on the first page of your IRS 1040, and the lines are listed here. So you would fill those in there. And then IRA deductions and payments to self-employed SEP, simple KEO plans. Those would be on your Schedule 1 of your IRS 1040. So you would fill that in here. And then tax exempt interest income from the IRS 1040 line 2A. If you're able to use the data retrieval tool, it does complete some of these items for you. It doesn't do the combat pay or the taxable scholarships, but it will fill in the education credits, untaxed IRA distributions, and tax exempt interest and IRA deductions. Those things usually come over through DRT if you're able to use that. If not, look for them on your tax returns and fill them in here. And then a few other questions about financial information. If your parents pay child support for children that don't live in your household, then you would report that here. If they pay child support, but the children are also included in the household, then you shouldn't report it. So it's only for children they're paying in another household. If you received earnings from work under a co-op program, we don't have co-op here at Framingham, but if you attended another institution before coming here, you might have had some co-op earnings through that school. And then taxable earnings from need-based employment programs such as federal work study. So if you had a work study job in 2020, then you can put your earnings for 2020 from that program in here. And we've pretty much gone over all of these things, but these are just examples of some of the untaxed income items that are asked about on the FAFSA that you would fill in when you get prompted for them. Now, some parents will be prompted to put information in about their assets and some will not. So if you do get the questions about the assets when you get to that part of the form, then what they will ask you for is the current balance of your parents' cash savings and checking accounts. So just fill that in to the best of your knowledge as of the day that you're doing the form. If your parents have any investments such as real estate outside of the home you live in, rental properties, money market or mutual funds, stocks and bonds, or 529 college savings plans, then those would get reported here. And then some businesses and farms need to be reported on the form, but that's typically only true if it's a business that is not fully family owned and has more than 100 employees. So most businesses get excluded on the FAFSA. And when you get to this section, just read the instructions on the form to see if you own a business, to see whether it needs to be included or not. After you get through all those parent income questions, the student is basically going to be asked the same set of questions about their income for 2020. If the student filed a tax return, again, they can try using the IRS data retrieval tool to import their 2020 tax information over from the IRS, and that's the quickest and easiest way to do it. If the student did not file, they will just put down will not file. And then if the student had any earnings for 2020, then you want to look at your 2020 W-2 and plug that in under income earned from work. Even if you didn't file a tax return, if you worked, you should still have a W-2 form. And you want to keep that form handy because you might need to turn that into the financial aid office if you get selected for verification by the government later on. Once you get through all of those income and asset questions, it will take you to the signature section of the form. And if you have FSA IDs for you and your parent, you can use those FSA IDs to sign the form electronically. And that is what we recommend that you do. Now, as a student, if you fill out this form and your parent isn't with you, then you can sign your portion of the form and save it, and then ask your parent to log in later on and sign it as well. You do need one parent whose information is on the form to sign it if you are a dependent student. If you're an independent student, then you'll just be putting information on the FAFSA about yourself and your own income and assets, and then you'll just have to sign it with your FSA ID. After you've gone through the steps of the signature, then you'll be given the option to submit the form. Now, sometimes parents aren't able to get an FSA ID. For example, that could happen if a parent doesn't have a social security number. The student needs a social security number to do the FAFSA, but their parent does not have to have one. So if that's the case, you should be able to print a signature page from this same section of the FAFSA, have your parents sign it, and then you can mail it into the CPS, which is the government central processing system, to process the FAFSA. It could take a week or two for them to receive that mailed in signature page and process it. So it's not as fast as using an FSA ID. But if you do that, you can check with our office to see if they've received the signature and processed a new FAFSA. And if you have any problems getting the signature to them for somebody that doesn't have an FSA ID, let us know, because we might be able to help you by doing a signature page in the office that your parent can sign. And here you can see, here are some of the other options for having the parents sign the form. So again, signing electronically with an FSA ID, if that's available, is the quickest and best way, but it's possible to print the signature page. You can also submit your FAFSA without the signatures. And what will happen if you do that is that we'll get an incomplete version of the FAFSA. And then we will start sending you emails, usually in March or April after we receive your incomplete FAFSA, to let you know that we got it, but we can't process it until you or your parents sign it. So if you do submit it without the signatures, either accidentally or on purpose, and then you start getting emails from us telling us that you need to sign it, you want to make sure that you get together with your parent, log back into the FAFSA, and submit these signatures, because we will never be able to process your FAFSA form if they never get submitted eventually. After you submit your form, you will get a confirmation page that looks like this, and it will also tell you what schools the form has been sent to. So you want to double check the schools that are listed there to make sure the Framingham State is listed there, so that we will get it. And then just so you know, if you do this all electronically, we will normally get your form within a week or two of you doing it. So I would say about a week after you've submitted the FAFSA, you can check with us to see if we've received it. And if we haven't, it could mean that there's a problem. For example, a lot of times people go in and complete the FAFSA and save it, but never submit it. That's a pretty common mistake that students make. So you may think that you submitted your FAFSA to us, but if we never get it, it could mean either that you didn't list us in the school section, or that you did not actually submit it. So, we will, for returning students, we usually start sending awards out in June. So if you don't hear from us by then regarding your financial aid, whether to tell you that something is missing or to tell you what your financial aid award is for next year, you might want to check with us, because it could mean that we never received your FAFSA. It's better to find out about that in June than it is to find out in August or September, right before school starts. Now, we want to let you know that you can contact us if there's been a change in your family situation and it's not accurately depicted on your FAFSA. So for example, the income information on the FAFSA is from 2020, and that's from a while ago now. So if you or your parents have experienced a loss in income since that time, let us know about it. If you or your parents have had a death or a serious illness in the family, unexpected medical bills, you can let us know about that. And then again, if for some reason you're having difficulty gathering the information you need from your parents to complete your FAFSA, you can come in and talk to us about that, and we can help you figure out the next steps. As I mentioned before, we should receive your form about a week or two after you do it, so you can check in with us about that. You should also receive an email from them, so keep an eye out for that, because if you don't get it, it could mean that something's wrong. Now, about 20% of the students that do the FAFSA get selected by the government for a process called verification each year. We don't select students for that, the government does, but we are required to collect additional documentation when that happens. So we might need to collect a copy of your 2020 tax returns or W-2 forms or other information. If that is the case, we will send you an email, usually during the months of March, April, and May. We send out emails to students that have been selected for this process to let them know that we're missing information and what you need to send us. So keep an eye on your FSU email, because that is where we will send this information. And then if we do have a complete application from you and we don't need any additional information, as I mentioned, we start sending out financial aid award offers typically in late June for returning students, and we will notify you via your FSU email when your award offer is ready on the My Framingham portal for you to go in and view. So if you need to help when you're doing the FAFSA, here is their phone number and their website. And they do also have a chat bot on the website where you can ask questions. You can also contact us for questions about the FAFSA as well. And here is our financial aid contact information. For those of you that are on campus and may not know this, we are located in the McCarthy Center on the 5th floor. We're part of the Student Service Center, which also includes the Student Accounts Office and the Registrar's Office. We're 3 separate offices, but we're all located in the same place. And we are open 9 to 5, Monday through Friday, all year round. So feel free to come in and ask us questions. You can also make an appointment with a financial aid counselor if you want somebody to guide you and help you through completing the FAFSA. But hopefully you find this presentation helpful to give you an idea of what's on the form. And if you do want to attempt to tackle it yourself, hopefully some of this information helps you. We also have some additional resources on our website. We have some financial aid TV videos about different financial aid topics, including some of the sections of the FAFSA and how to complete them. And we have a chat bot that can answer general questions. So if it's after hours and you have a question and we're not open, you can go online to our website and ask a question of our chat bot. And if it's a general question, it will either answer it for you or it will refer you to our office. So thank you for viewing this presentation. I hope you find it helpful as you complete your financial aid applications for next year, and make sure you contact us and let us know if there's anything we can do to help you. Thanks and have a great day.